Alright, folks, hopefully you're going to be hearing me momentarily, so please let me know in the chat when you actually do. And once you do, we'll get started here. So hopefully some of you guys have questions for me. Otherwise, this is going to be fairly quick and straightforward. There's really only two kind of sets of notes to run through real fast, and the quiz is actually pretty short. So we'll get going. Alright, so let's kind of just jump into the first group here, and we can try to make this to be a fairly efficient and quick stream. So let me just carry one of these over here quick. So if you remember, we started off this unit, this topic, whatever you want to call it, talking about the Islamic empires, right? So the Islamic empires that we talked about in particular were the Ottomans, right? And also the Mughal Empire. So let's kind of get moving here. Whoops. So the Ottoman Empire is basically a group of people that are going to set up and come out of what is modern day Turkey, right? So that is where they are, and that's basically what could be a question on the test. Modern day Turkey, they're going to come out of it's called Asia Minor as well, all geographic regions that you should be aware of. The Ottomans are going to kind of start as a people around 1300s, and as an empire, right, they're going to last almost all the way until 1923, right after World War I. With the treaties and things like that, they're going to end up being sort of dissolved. But Turkey is going to come after that, right? And the Ottoman Empire as a group is going to really emerge as a bit of a power and a powerhouse after their conquest and sack of Constantinople and the Byzantines in 1453, right? They're going to rename the capital of Constantinople into Istanbul, and that's something you should probably know. So, hint, hint. Right, so Asia Minor, as we talked about, Asia Minor is typically referred to as kind of this. I'm going to move to a map here. Asia Minor, is a better map? Yeah. So Asia Minor is this kind of area, right? It's kind of almost Europe still. It's kind of Eurasia. It's the Near East, other words referred to. That's kind of the region that we would be referring to when we talked about Asia Minor, right? And Istanbul is going to be kind of right here. It's actually called the Dardanelles, right here, this strait between the Black Sea and down into the Mediterranean Sea. And it's going to, modern day Turkey is again the country you should be aware of, okay? So, there we go. Okay, so we kind of just talked about that, right? So it's southeastern Europe, and the Ottomans are going to expand out of there into the Balkan Peninsula. So the Balkans, and I realize I should keep this map up while I'm talking here probably. The Balkans is this area kind of in Eastern Europe, right here. So the Balkans, there's this mountain ranges along here. Slovenia, you have what's modern day Croatia, Serbia, and these mountains are known as the Balkans. So that is where the Ottoman Empire is going to predominantly be, right? In Turkey, you're going to end up a little bit down into here, and then in Eastern Europe there are your big ones, right? So, let me see if I open this up, what happens? So this is the spread, right? And there's probably going to be some sort of map that I would recommend you kind of knowing this a little bit, or at least a little bit, because there's going to be a map that kind of asks questions related to these concepts to some extent. So I would just kind of know that rate at which it expands. I think there's a slider right here. Here we go. So cool. So you can kind of see as the years go on, how big the Ottoman Empire is going to end up getting, right? So there might be a map on the quiz that's going to ask you to read it, and you'll be able to get all the answers for the questions from the map. But if you kind of look at this over a little bit and kind of familiarize yourself at least a little bit, that should help you even more for that map that I would you should know. Okay, so let's keep moving. So one of the big things about the Ottoman Empire in particular, right, is that it's an Islamic empire, right? So you don't really need to remember any of the places for the map. I just say it would probably be a good idea to just look at it and just familiarize yourself a little bit with it, because any map on the quiz in particular is going to, you can get the answers for the map from that map, essentially. Especially that one I'm thinking of in particular. So, but anyway, the Ottomans were an Islamic empire, right? And they are going to use Islam as this unifying force for them, and that's, they're going to be able to kind of grow and expand as Islam is going to expand in the areas as well. And one thing as well, the Ottomans are known for being fairly tolerant of other religions. The fact that Christianity and Judaism are prominent in these areas, they didn't just kind of try to stamp those religions out, but they kind of immersed themselves in it a little bit, and they just let them be. They might have taxed them and taken advantage of them in that capacity, but as far as religious goes, they didn't start any fights from the religious standpoint. So, as far as trade goods that you're going to be asked to know about, right, you have the coffee and ceramics are these two kind of things that you might consider like culturally significant to the Ottoman Empire. So it might be a question about something like that. So, Mrs. Kipperman talked to you guys about her time in Turkey and talked about the tea and Turkish coffee and the foods that she ate and things. So there's all the pictures that she kind of included to you guys. So I'm just going to kind of keep moving through this. There's the videos again if you wanted to watch those again. They're not going to be really relevant for your quiz though, I would say. So let's move into the Mughals, right? So the Mughals are going to be descendants of your Islamic Mongols, right? Everyone hopefully remembers the Mongols and Genghis Khan and his descendants, right? And as they moved west and they pushed all the way into the Near East, essentially, Islam is going to be brought back with them, right? Sydney, no, there's not really anything that she's going to have talked about culturally that's going to be on the quiz, I wouldn't say. But anyway, so as the Mongols, they came back, right, as they went back, they brought this Islam with them a little bit, and ultimately, the Mughals are going to be descendants of these Mongols that had brought Islam, right? And they are going to kind of settle a bit in northern India, and ultimately, they're going to expand using Islam again to extend into most of India. So you should know that the Mughals are connected to modern day India. There might be a map on the quiz that asks something like that. It might ask you to point to where India is in association with the Mughals, or it might ask which country this is and which empire is associated with it. Something along those lines would probably be a good idea to know. So here is a map of India, right? And you can see the spread of the empire a bit. From 1526, it looks like, down to 1605, and then 1707, the Mughals got to be fairly strong, right? And to encompass most of the subcontinent of India. So, one of the big contributions of the Mughals were culturally, right, Islam and just spreading Islam into India, and there's Islam and Hinduism are very prominent still in India today. You also have the architecture, right, the Taj Mahal, built by this Shah, I'm probably going to say this wrong, Jahan, in memory of his wife. And Mrs. Kipperman talked about that too. You got a picture of the Taj Mahal right here. So it might be a good idea to know what the Taj Mahal looks like. There could be something asking, what this building is or which empire this building is associated with. Things of that nature could be relevant. So, okay. So, as far as the Mughals go, some of the textiles and things and trade goods that are associated with them and you might consider culturally significant, you have just textiles, right? So cloth goods, cotton, wool, and silk are going to really be embedded into the British manufacturing when the British kind of come to India and they set up their colonies, as well as the Netherlands and the Dutch. The Netherlands is the Dutch. So familiarize yourself again with the trade goods of all of these different groups we're talking about for sure. They could be things on the quiz. So southern India is going to become kind of independent, and they're going to continue their trade in mostly silks, spices, and gems. And then also we talked about Da Gama and the Portuguese, right? And ultimately you should know that on their way to India, these traders are going to take advantage of geographically going around Africa, and there are things that they might obtain on the way that they could trade then in India, right? So things like ivory and gold were being gained from, being grabbed from Africa essentially and brought to India on the way, where they would then fill up their holds in India, and they would probably trade a little bit in Africa before they went all the way back to Europe as well, right? With the triangular trade, there were new food products and things that were associated with, being introduced to Africa, and those in particular are corn and peanuts. So you should probably be familiar with that too. So just like that, we're kind of done with the Mughals and the Ottomans as far as what you should be expected to know on the quiz anyway. I've already kind of talked about the main things. I would know the trade goods. Trade goods and what's being brought to there. I would know about the Taj Mahal. I would know that it's in Islamic Empire and in India. Those are all things that would be important, I would say. Okay, so let's kind of jump into our next one. So I gotta bring it over here. Alright, anyway, so I can tell you guys now in the middle here, make it harder to find for people to find it, that there is going to be an extra credit question, or actually two. We'll make it worth 2 points on your quiz tomorrow. That extra credit question is going to be actually, what are the names of my siblings? So I'll just tell you right now, I have a sister and a brother, and my sister's name is Renee, and my brother's name is Dan. So if you know those when we ask them tomorrow, then you're going to get, or I guess tomorrow or Thursday, depending when you actually watch this, you'll get some extra credit points. But again, I know how many people have viewed the video and how many people have watched it, so if you guys end up sharing this with other people, then I'm going to stop doing this. This is the incentive to start coming to this. So I'll know, and I'll probably null and void the extra credit points, and I might not offer that anymore in the future, so it'd be silly to. So anyway, Dan and Renee are their names. Renee is R-E-N-E-E, if anyone, I guess, wants to know how to spell it. So, let's again talk about the Asian empires now, and China and Japan, and the trade relationships of these groups with Europe. You just spelled it right, Sydney. So, anyway, alright, so let's talk about China, right? We have the European traders that are heading to Asia, right, from Europe, and they go around Africa, and they end up in India, and they end up in Southeast Asia before they end up in China usually, right? So they're usually stopping all the different steps of the way here, but effectively China is going to be one of these areas that is going to be really, I guess, profitable for the Europeans heading there. There are things that they want, and tea is going to be incredibly vital, incredibly important for, just, it becomes a huge commodity, and people are heavily in demand. So China is going to be mostly trading in tea and porcelain, which is going to be also associated with tea. And with the major foreign influence being brought into China, one of the things that China is going to do is to try to control foreign trade is create what's known as foreign enclaves, right? And they're going to try to control that trade. And what that means is these Europeans coming in are only going to be able to trade at these certain ports that are deemed okay by the Chinese. And this is meant as a way to try to limit the amount that foreigners are going to have access to regular Chinese people, and therefore be able to influence their thought and their ways and things like that, with things like religion and culture and other things, right? The Chinese didn't want that in particular, so they tried to stop it. Okay, so well, there's nothing going to be actually on the quiz about tea, at least this video anyway. But you should definitely know that tea and porcelain are their main goods, right? We also talked about Japan, and we talked about European traders showing up in Japan. And when this was going on, there was a bit of civil war, right? We talked about the daimyo, and we talked about the shogun, right? The shogun is this kind of powerful military leader named Tokugawa. This is the Tokugawa era, anyway. And at the end of the civil war, the shogun essentially is going to have a bit of power over the emperor. It's going to be kind of this lame duck period for the emperor, where the shogun's going to be a bit more in control than the emperor, and the emperor is going to kind of just remain as this figurehead, if you will. So know that a shogun is a powerful military leader, and you will be pretty well off on that for things like that. So we watched. So we also know that foreigners are coming into Japan, just like we know that they were coming into China, right? And they were able to culturally influence the Japanese quite a bit, especially with things like religion and Christianity, right? So much so that the shoguns are going to start to crack down on Christianity. And we watched a video from the movie Silence, right? Kind of this persecution of Christians and Christian people trying to spread Christianity in Japan. They felt Christianity, and they felt these cultural changes are going to kind of threaten their political power and their way of life in Japan. And therefore, under the shoguns and under the Tokugawa era, Japan is going to adopt this policy of isolation, and you should be familiar with that. If we're going to ask a question about isolation, while China, they didn't necessarily isolate themselves so much. They adopted these foreign enclaves. Japan, they completely try to cut themselves off from the outside world, right? So much so that when America shows up in the 1850s, I believe it is, it's going to be a major surprise to them when they're coming in with like what you could almost consider modern warships, right? These metal modern warships, steamships and things like that. They're just not. They're just so far behind technologically. They realize they've missed so much, right, because of this isolation. So they expel the foreigners. They do allow a little bit of trade at one port called Nagasaki, but they're also trying to limit the amount of Japanese leaving, right? And for the same reason, they're trying to control the people through this isolation and to keep things the status quo, essentially, I would call it, right? So we also talked about, so that's it about China and Japan, I would say. And the next thing you're going to need to know is about kind of mercantilism, right? We talked about it and we played that game, though I guess technically the Even Day has not played the game yet. That'll be next class because PCPSA team messed us up a bit. So anyway, right, during the Age of Exploration, you're going to get the beginning of colonies, right? And colonies were super important for a number of different reasons. They include resources, right, and people taking resources from the colonies and generating wealth through their colonies. It also creates overseas markets, right? All the people in these colonies are people that you can sell these goods now and these manufactured goods to, right? So all of these things are very beneficial to the European nations, and this system of linking European nations and colonies is known as mercantilism, right? You should know that as a definition, essentially. And the idea is that these European colonial powers these European powers anyway, are going to try to become self-sufficient through their colonies. So they don't have to rely on trading with other people too much, because trade benefits everyone involved usually, right? So if they can only work through their colonies, they might be able to get an upper hand on the other countries that don't have as many colonies, or be able to pull out resources from other colonies. That way they might be able to control or conquer them later on, or if they get into a war, they can beat them, right? And there's this whole idea that the colonies are going to exist for the sole benefit of the mother country, right? And I know I changed the rules of the game a little bit, where anyone associated with the one country could trade with each other, but in reality, in most cases, the mother country was only letting the colonies trade with them. That was a way to control them and not let them try to get to be a bit more powerful, right? So we talked about the raw materials, right? Colonies being a source of raw materials for European nations. The markets we just kind of talked about, and then, so this is just kind of a recap of what I just said. So, all right. And then the last part is, with all this trade now happening around the world and through the colonies and things, you're going to get what's known as the commercial revolution. And the idea of this is trying to figure out ways to have money flow around the colonies and around these European countries, and establishing banking systems and things like that. You're going to get exchanges, locations for money and coin, to paper money and things like that, right? They needed to develop economic systems to be able to run these systems of trade around the world, right? And with that, that's actually pretty much it. So this was a pretty quick live stream here. So unless you guys got a couple more questions, we'll call it a night. We'll let you guys study some more, and hopefully your odd days are ready to go for this quiz tomorrow. So I'll leave this up for about 30 seconds to another minute, and if any questions pop up, great. If not, we'll let you be. Well, folks, I hope you guys have a good night and good luck studying, and I'll see you all tomorrow or Tuesday.